welcome to episode 25 of Roleplay Grow, the podcast for tabletop entrepreneurs, creators, and fans. I am Courtney Stover of Lightheart Adventures, and in this podcast, we talk to the creators behind the brands and the tabletop roleplay gaming space about who they are and how they are turning their passion for gaming into a career. If you've spent any amount of time on ttrpg Twitter, you've probably seen the gorgeous round dice boxes with colorful and magical epoxy patterns created by Staff and Branch. I am delighted to introduce you all to today's guest, Tim Carlson, the owner of Staff and Branch and maker of these dice boxes. Snagging a box for yourself is a pretty elusive goal, as he's usually sold out within minutes of his biweekly restocks. Tim never intended this to be a full-time business, but we dive into how he got started with Staff and Branch and how it's grown into a successful business in less than 2 years. You'll get insight into the construction of these boxes, his thoughts on Etsy, and more. Before we get into the interviews today, I wanted to share this really sweet review that I got on Apple Podcasts. Reviews are one of the best ways to support a show, as they tell the algorithm gods that a show is worth promoting and more people can find it. So this review is from Lulu in WA, and they say, entertaining and inspirational. I am really enjoying this podcast so far. I've only listened to a few episodes, but I really enjoy the behind-the-scenes view at some of my favorite TTRPG creators. It is entertaining and inspiring. There are so many podcasts out there, and I have a limited amount of time to listen. I'm happy to add RPG to my commute podcast rotation. Seriously, thank you so much, Lulu. Reading this really made my day today. Some other ways that you can support the show are via our Patreon page, which has a few different tracks depending on whether you'd like maps and adventures or tailored content for this podcast, including contributing questions for upcoming guests, a spotlight on our website, and even a shout out on this show. You can also check out our affiliates. Last week, I mentioned that with the start of September, everything fall and pumpkin related is coming out, and it is my time. We talked about Friday Afternoon Tea's amazing fall blends, but this time I want to highlight Dice Envy's fall dice set called Pumpkin Dice Latte. It is a very pretty pumpkin-themed set of orange dice featuring sprinkles of gold glitter, a luscious swirl of gold micro glitter, and just a hint of nutmeg. Go to diceenvy.com, entering code LightheartADV to receive 10% off your order of those dice or any other ones that catch your fancy, and help support this show. All right, thanks for sticking around, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tim. Today, I am joined by the very talented Tim Carlson, owner of Staff and Branch and maker of the most gorgeous dice boxes that you will ever see. Hello, Tim. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you and get to know all about the cool stuff that you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, I like it. I feel lucky to be able to do it, so I'm excited to talk.
Yeah. Well, to start things off, can you tell us a bit about who you are and how you got into gaming?
Sure. So I'm Tim. I guess I got into gaming really when I was 40. I played Dungeons and Dragons a little bit in college, like occasionally. I think one time I had a road trip out to Washington, D.C. That we played Dungeons and Dragons in the car with, but nothing sustained and nothing really getting past like, yeah, let's do it. And then rolling up some characters and then dropping the thread kind of thing. So, but then I turned 40 and it was 2017, 2000. Yeah. And the world felt really lonely, and I was living out in Massachusetts. I'm from Michigan originally, and one of my buddies, his dad died, and then shortly after he showed a picture, he sent a group text to of a picture of his daughter, who was at the time I think 13, and she had kind of gotten out all of his old D&D stuff, and so he was like, "Look at this, she's checking it out," and I was like, "That's awesome, I want to play." And I wanted to play because for a couple of reasons. I'd been listening to some actual play podcasts and it sounded fun. And then also just like wanted to figure out a way to, be there for him and for my other friends who were who wanted to play. And And this was the best way I could think because we were all spread out over the country. And so I got together and said I would DM, which I had never really done before. And then it was started a 3-year campaign that we did from level 1 to 20 that just finished up actually in June. We finally came to a conclusion with that. But like after about, I don't know, 3-4 months of us playing, when it became clear that we all needed it as much as I did, I made them all dice boxes. I used to make furniture for a living, and so we'd have all these like little offcuts, little pieces of wood that we couldn't really do much with them, and so I would take those, and instead of burning them, I made them some gifts, and then I started making dice boxes kind of as a side hustle. But the game has really kind of been, so it has become such an important part of my life and their lives, and just, I don't know, when you get to be a certain age, you get to be 40 years old, it's hard to have friends because you have other life things. And so we would call each other on the phone every 6 months and have this super intense hour-and-a-half long conversation that looked nothing like what it was when we were friends. And so all of a sudden D&D came along, and it was like, wow, this feels familiar. This feels like having friends, and this feels like just hanging out and laughing with each other, and it's been amazing.
That sounds amazing. Just the journey that you took on, it starting because of his daughter finding his old equipment, and then
Right.
just how that's grown. That sounds really special.
Yeah, I definitely have moments multiple times a week where I'm like, I cannot believe that D&D has become such a huge part of my life socially as well as professionally. It has been just kind of a wild ride, and completely unexpected. Not what I had planned. Like I said, I was making furniture. I did that for about 10 years. Yeah, at no point was I like, okay, now I'm going to make my D&D business. Like that didn't seem like something that could happen. So the fact that I'm doing it now is really, I constantly pinching myself.
Well, yeah. So I would love to start with, okay, you used to make furniture. How did you
Yeah.
get into woodworking in the first place?
So I moved out to Massachusetts from Michigan in 2006, before the Great Recession, where my wife and we had just gotten married. She has family out here, and they had like a mother-in-law apartment. And we're like, let's go out. We'll go out for a year and we'll write books, and it'll be great. And it has been great, but a year has turned into 17 years or 16 years. And you move someplace new, you don't know anyone. I desperately needed a hobby. So I decided I was going to make my own speakers. And then that was just a ridiculous development, which I ended up doing, and they still work, and they're great. But from there, I realized I was thinking a lot more about woodworking than I was about writing, and there was something about it that I really liked. So I found a cabinet making school that was in town, and so I went there for a year. I had good experiences, but didn't want to work in a cabinet shop because I was more interested in furniture, which is, they're different. They're not the same. And so I ended up apprenticing with a furniture maker for about a year before my daughter was born. And then after my daughter was born, it was about, I don't know, a couple of years where I was just working at a kitchen store. And then this guy was moving his furniture making business from Brooklyn to my town. And the guy who I went to school, who owned the school I went to, emailed me and was like, I think this might be right up your alley. And so then I went and worked for this guy for, like I said, about 9 years. And it was an amazing experience. It was like, I felt like I was in college for 9 years and never graduated. By the end, my degree was in interdisciplinary humanities. So I've always had a hard time finding something that I wanted to do, and figuring out what kind of life plan I wanted to have. So all of a sudden I found myself making furniture, and I was like, this is the right thing. This is what I should be doing. And it was great. And it was really challenging. And it was really, some of the things I was very good at. Some of the things were not always my specialty, but it was a good learning experience either way. So yeah, I did that, and then he basically was like, "Look, I want to retire," and so he started slowing down, and so then I started looking around for other jobs. I found some that weren't one that wasn't great, and then had an interview for a really nice furniture job in town that I was excited about, but I interviewed with them in July of 2019. Didn't hear anything from them. And then meanwhile, I started making, I was like, I guess I'll, in between looking for work, I'll kind of lean into this like side Etsy project of making these dice boxes. And I have like a small little shop in my basement, and I started making them. And then in October of 2019, I guess, it was like all of a sudden someone, I don't know if you're familiar with Greenleaf Geek, but they're a dice maker, and they retweeted one of my boxes, and all of a sudden people started seeing them. And so it's kind of been off to the races from there.
That is such a wonderful story and journey that you've gone on. And to acknowledge something you said earlier, I don't know that anyone really ever has a life plan figured out. Like,
right. No, that is absolutely true. I mean, or at least for me, it's absolutely true. And I've been lucky enough to be able to kind of take the opportunities that have come to me and been able to tread water in between those opportunities, I guess. But yeah, so that's kind of how I started out doing these boxes, was that meandering woodworking path, and then discovering D&D around the same time that I needed to find another job and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I would love to hear a bit more about that transition. So you decided to make a dice box for yourself and for your friends.
You'd think I would make one for myself, but I don't own any. I still don't own any dice boxes of my own. I don't know why. I guess that's not true. I do have one from, I think it's Elderwood Academy, that one of that a Twitter friend, 88 Riddles, he paints them, and so I bought one from him. But that, and then I have some dice bags that I've gotten from folks, but I don't own anything of my own for some reason. I don't know. It's just I am not compelled to keep them for whatever reason.
Fair enough.
But yes. So I started when I first made the boxes. They didn't have any epoxy. They were their same shape, round shape, and they had the split opening like they do now. But I didn't use any epoxy because I didn't really know much about it. And the furniture place it was all hardwood furniture, and so I was really into that. But then as I started making them, I started getting interested more in like the D&D community, and you just see all these people making all these beautiful dice. And then I think it was Sasha from Sun Shadow Arts. She makes beautiful dice, but she also did make some boxes, at least for a while. I don't know if she does anymore, but it had epoxy in the box. And I was like, that is amazing. I really want to figure out how to do something like that. And then so I started looking into like YouTube channels and different epoxy forums, and just kind of trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do. And epoxy and wood, I guess, is not anything new. People have been using it together for years and years. I never really I don't tend to like the big tables that have epoxy rivers in them. They just are too much. But I do really like having a small little thing that kind of has some pop to it. And I don't know, I felt like it started, like it clicked with me in a way that few things have. I've never considered myself an artistic person at all. And so it was a surprise to me that all of a sudden I was making art for a living. That was not at all, like I just couldn't have imagined doing it. That was a rambling answer. I don't know if that is if that answered what you were asking or not, but that's what I did.
Yeah, no, like it's really interesting. So I guess I'm just curious about the transition from making it for your friends, not yourself. Yeah, from that point until the time that you decided that you wanted to try selling these, like what was that transition like?
So when I made the first boxes for my friends, one of my friends lives in Seattle. He was talking about it with some of his coworkers, and some of his coworkers, their spouses worked for Wizards of the Coast, and they were like, "Wow, that looks really cool. I'd like one." And so he got back in touch with me and was like, "Look, these people are interested. You might want to think about doing it." So I kind of just sheepishly put up an Etsy page and was like severely undercharged people for the boxes, and just kind of started doing that, and didn't really like it. Was very much a side project where I was, I'd do it on the weekends occasionally, or if it, like I think I technically started in 2018 and would do it just kind of when I had a moment. But I also had small kids, and I had, I had a full-time job. So it was very laid back. And then, as I said, then that happened for about a year. And then it started becoming clear that I needed to find a different job. And so the biggest thing I started doing besides making more of them was promoting myself, or trying to post things onto social media and Twitter and Instagram, and I guess by extension Facebook. And that was when it kind of became like okay, this is more feasible to this. Like once I started getting a little traction, I was like, I can see a path where I can continue to do this, and still am able to make not a great living, but certainly a passable living. And it's kind of been, getting better and better since. So the biggest thing was kind of understanding that no one is just going to find you. You have to announce yourself if you can, as much as you can.
Yeah. Marketing is that necessary evil.
Yeah. And what I didn't realize at the time when I was like, all right, I can do this, is just like, I'm a one-person shop. So I make everything, do all the marketing for social media, advertising. I pack and ship everything. It was just like the list keeps going. I do all the photos. It's just like it is a lot of full-time jobs that I do. One of those full-time jobs really well. I think I make really nice boxes, and then the rest I just kind of do the best I can and hope for the best. But it isn't always easy. It is a little tiring at times, but also very rewarding.
Oh, I totally get that. You're like, I just want to be a woodworker, but also now I'm a photographer and a social media coordinator and
yeah. The other wild thing that happened too is like when I decided, all right, I'm going to do this full time in like October, November of 2019. In December of 2019, that really great job that I had applied for in the summer called me back and was like, "Do you want to do this? Like we have this job for you now." And I was just like, "Oh man, I think I need to try to do this other thing that I'm doing because it has potential." Which was a really hard decision because there were a lot of unknowns. There are still a lot of unknowns, but it was like, at some point you got to bet on yourself, and if you want to do the things you want to do. So I decided to give it a try, and yeah, that was. And then immediately after that, there was the pandemic, and so that I had no idea how that would affect me or not. Turns out it probably ended up working out best because I get to work from home. I'm not out and about in the world so much, and so was able to kind of reduce my my exposure to things, and yeah, the business itself hadn't been negatively affected by it, so that was good. But I look forward to it being over at some point.
For sure. One of the questions I like to ask is, okay, well, how did the pandemic affect your business? It's like, well, I guess it's been the majority of the time of your business.
Yeah, that's what's been so wild. Is like I think about it every once in a while. I'm like, yeah, for all but like 3 months of my business was really just has been in the pandemic. And so that on its own has been a wild ride. And it is difficult to work from home, have your wife work from home, and have your kids both be having remote school from home and trying to be somewhat productive. That was the trickiest part, just kind of juggling all that. You eventually figure it out, but it definitely was a balancing act that I was not always prepared for. But yeah, I mean, I look back at my sales like in that March, April of 2020, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I was depressed and going through stuff where it's like, oh, the world's ending. Great. So not my most productive time of my business, but I have since rebounded and feel good about where things are going.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that anyone that was able to accomplish any amount of business things in the last year and a half, like it's admirable. It has not been easy.
It's tiring, It just makes like everything is more tiring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, working for myself had allowed me to kind of give myself a little break here and there in terms of like, on the one hand, there's an imperative to make money, but on the other hand, like there were days where I just like, I can't today. I need to, I need to take today off. So yeah, and thankfully, my family, my wife and kids, have been super supportive and, leading the gang of people cheering me on. So it makes everything so much easier when, the stresses of the business are not mine alone. Can share them with, with my wife, and we can talk about them and figure things out for us. But, pretty much from the jump, as soon as it became even remotely possible that this was something I could do, she's been like, this is what you're doing. Like, I don't want to hear you talking about anything else. Like, this is what you do now. And so that's been really great and super helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do like to get into kind of some businessy decisions.
Yeah.
So something I'm curious about is for back when you were first starting and you decided to open up this Etsy shop. And I know for a lot of new creators and new makers that it's hard to balance that, deciding like how much inventory you're going to have, like how much you're going to invest in getting materials before you even have any sales.
Right.
So I just love to know what your process was for getting your shop set up.
Well, I think for me, it was really low stakes because I was basically just getting because I was just using wood. I was just getting my materials from literally scrap wood that we were throwing away at my day job. So like the idea of investing money up front was never a concern initially. So when I first started, it was like, I have this shop in my basement. I was able to also work in off hours at my furniture making job. My boss was like, yeah, if you want to come in here, that's fine. So that was great. And so like, I really kind of nibbled at it at first because like I said, it was not something that I was considering to do full time. And so, it would, like my biggest expense was sandpaper and finish. So that's, that's very doable. When I decided to go full time, that's when things got a little bit, not even scarier, but just like more real. The first time I spent, I had to get a wood shipment. It was, it was like $1,000, and I was like, wow, this is me saying something that to myself that like, okay, this is a deal, like no going back, kind of thing. And so yeah, initially there wasn't a lot of. Initially, it was just like I mean, I'll put stuff up, and in terms of inventory, like before people found me, I was never too concerned. Like I don't think I've really ever had more than 20 boxes at once up in my store. And now I don't have any. Because they sell out so fast. I put them up, people buy them, and then like 20 minutes later, people are like, where are they? And I have to explain, I'm sorry. When that first started happening, that actually caused a little bit of, I don't know if it was a panic attack, but I started getting a little traction in like January. of 2020 where things really started to move for me. And at that point, I had just agreed to do my first convention. And I was like, oh, my whole plan has changed because in order to have stuff for the convention, I need to not sell things so that I can bring them to the convention. And then Karen from Dispel Dice contacted me and asked me to make her some custom boxes for her. And that, oh my gosh, she at that point had the largest Kickstarter ever. And I was like, this feels overwhelming a little bit. Like I went from 3 months before, having, I think the year before went full time, I made like $2,000 total in my shop. And then all of a sudden, I was sold out of everything, and people I had a lot of respect for were contacting me about, possibly making them a box. And so it all felt like it was coming at me very quickly. Eventually I was able to kind of just take a deep breath. And the other thing too is I have ADD. So like all of a sudden I was being hit by what felt like all sides, and I didn't know which way to look. And so it was just a lot to take in, but I eventually kind of was able to figure out some of that stuff. And eventually this past spring, you're talking about investment in your company. I bought a CNC machine, which is a computer controlled router, which basically does a lot of the time intensive, low skill labor much faster and much more efficiently. And so I finally got that going up. This last update I had last weekend was the first set of boxes I made using the new machine. But that was not a small investment. That was a very large investment and super scary to agree to. But if I wanted to grow at all, it was what had to happen, because I was making as many as I could and selling them out as fast as I could make them. Like I still don't know where my cap is, if that makes sense. I don't know. I haven't figured out how many I can make that will still all be bought. I don't know how to have backstock at this point. So we'll keep going and seeing what happens.
Well, congratulations. That is a huge investment, I know, but that's going to be so exciting.
It has been exciting. It's been kind of relearning how to do my bit. I had been doing it for full time for about a year and a half, and doing it one way, and so now I'm doing it a different way, and it requires different skills. And so that first batch in particular was really a little nerve-wracking, and I'd messed up and basically had put them on backwards, like the tops on backwards from what I was used to. So then I had to switch things and then keep everything separate. And it kind of started preying on things that I'm really terrible at, like keeping track of things. So, which is why I honestly, I don't do special orders, because it just crashes everything, grinds to a halt, because if I don't take care of something right away, it tends to fall through the cracks. And so with the special orders, like they're with emails and with everything, it just like all of a sudden when I was doing them, I was like, I'm making about half as many boxes as I could because of these 3 special orders that are hanging over my head and just interrupting me and doing crazy stuff. So it's been kind of a slow process to figure out what kind of business I need to run or can run. I feel like I'm still figuring that out. And we'll see. I certainly never thought of myself as the kind of person who would own their own business. So when I all of a sudden found myself doing just that, it wasn't expected. And I spent 10 years learning how to make boxes. I have spent about a year now learning how to run a business, and I'm much better at one than the other, but I'm learning. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, entrepreneurs! I love introducing you to new creators every episode, but I could really use your support. I would love to invite you to join our Patreon page, where you'll gain access to behind-the-scenes content, add your questions to upcoming interviews, and you could even receive a shout-out on our site in an upcoming episode. To learn more, go to lightheartadventures.com/RPG. And now, back to the show. I would love to learn about your design process.
Mm-hmm. So first, for the most important thing I think for me is the wood that I start with. And one of the things, there are a lot of people making dice boxes, including very big people like Wormwood, and I have a lot of respect for the skill and craftsmanship that they have. However, I wanted to do something that didn't use African hardwoods or tropical woods, because having worked in furniture, even the sustainably sourced stuff seemed sketchy to me. And when I make something out of walnut, I know it came from Pennsylvania, and I know how it is harvested, and there's just fewer unknowns. The other thing too is when I started doing epoxy, like it gets too much if you're using this really exotic fancy wood that has this amazing grain. It seems a shame to then cut a lot of that out and put a bunch of epoxy in there. That wood is beautiful enough on its own. So I wanted to. So when I start with wood, I usually have it's domestic species. It's a lot of walnut, sycamore, maples, things like that. And then also like nothing that like I want it to be, have some character, but it doesn't need to be the most wild grain pattern or something like that, because that's what the epoxy is for. If you mix them together, I feel like it just gets too much. So then I'll pick out the wood, and then I basically cut the tops, so I take a thick piece of wood, say a 2-inch piece of wood. I'll cut off like a 1/2 inch of that, and that will be the tops. So with my boxes, a lot of them, when I can, the grain will run from the top to the bottom if you're looking at it from the sides, and it just helps kind of bring everything together, make sure the color matches, and it just kind of looks right. But then with those tops, I then cut those into like blocks. In my case, it's like 5x5 or 6x6, and then I'll look at the grain or look at the piece of wood, and I'll figure out some kind of shape. Sometimes it will be a very I'll cut out, like I've been making these dragon eye kind of shape boxes for a little while now, and so I'll cut out the top to have an opening that looks kind of like an eye. Other times it's kind of more like a meandering kind of river kind of look that I'll cut out of the middle. So then I have these two pieces. I'll put those in a mold, and I'll fill it with epoxy. Now with the epoxy, there are different colorants like mica powder or alcohol ink and glitters and foils and gold leaf, and there's all sorts of things you can add into it. And so I try and think mostly of a color palette. One of the first times I used alcohol ink, I was like, I want to try and do a sunset kind of thing. So it was like a yellow, orange, dark red, purple, and then like a dark blue, and kind of have a gradient like that. So I mean, I do a lot of nature kind of things, and I do a lot of space kind of things, because those are the kind of things that interest me and that I'm inspired to do. And then also the thing about epoxy is it is finicky, but I find forgiving, in that even if you mess up what you're trying to do, it will still kind of look pretty cool. So there, like some of my favorite designs I've done have been because I was trying to do something else and it didn't work out the way I thought it would, but it ended up being this really cool other thing that I wasn't expecting. And so what I like about doing it the way I do it, as opposed to like if I just did like a run of 10 boxes at once, where after I pour the epoxy, I then cut up the tops. That would probably be more time efficient, but then you're making 10 boxes that are the same. I like to be able to make different things. And I think that there are going to be people who start doing what I'm doing. And when that happens, I wish them luck. But what I like about what I do is that each box, even if it's a design that I've done before, it doesn't look the same as the one I did before. It's going to be a little different. So each box is going to be unique, and each box is its own special thing. That really, for that's what keeps me interested. If I did it a different way, as I say, I might be able to make more of them, but I would get bored. and I wouldn't want to do it anymore. By doing each box individually, I get to choose what I'm feeling that day, and I get to, and I mean, thankfully, I've found a customer base and a community that appreciates that. If no one was buying them, it would be a lot harder. But because I'm able to make a different variety of things, the Dragon's Eye boxes might not be for you, but maybe the space one is, or maybe, the one that looks kind of like Earth from above, or, it is a fun medium to play with because you can get so many different results if you just play around and experiment and figure out what works and what you want to try and do.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there is a huge appeal and that just every one of your boxes is completely unique and really special.
Thank you. I when I started using epoxy, I was like, I want to make things that are worthy of these amazing dice that people are making. And if I can do that, then I feel like it becomes part of the specialness of it, like you, and like if you can if the dice match up or whatever, there have been a couple times I've teamed up with dice makers and so made a box that goes along with the dice that they've made, and that's been really special to me. Just be able to kind of have that collaboration, which it isn't always easy because it's not like I'm working right next to these people and we each have our own businesses that we're trying to figure. But when it has been able to work out, it has been really nice. I really like promoting other people's work, and I really like, and that includes other dice box makers, because I understand that in order to make the boxes I make, I have to charge a lot more than what a lot of people can afford. And so there are a lot of really amazing craftsmen out there who are making boxes that are much more affordable than what I am making. And their work is great. And I feel like the community, the D&D playing community, or the tabletop role playing community, is very generous and wants to support smaller businesses and smaller makers. And that's been the not surprise, but like just such a unforeseen benefit that I hadn't anticipated. When I first started making them, I was like, oh, people will buy one, that'll be great. I didn't think people would buy more than one. And like there is one person who has bought 20 of them.
Oh, wow.
And like that, never in my wildest dreams did I think that someone would do that. But even like there are people who bought 3 or 4 of them that I never thought would happen. So I'm always blown away by the people who appreciate the work that I do and have always been very supportive, even if they can't buy a box, just retweeting stuff or sharing it on social or telling me they like it, like that. It goes a long way, and I really am grateful every time I sell something. I am super grateful that someone sees value in something that I'm making. It is an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I imagine it must be. I do have like a couple of questions on, I mean, I know that the answer that might change once you get more accustomed to the CNC machine, but do you have a goal at the moment about like how often you restock or how many items you're going to have when you restock?
Yeah. So yeah, that is in flux right now because I don't know. However, I try and restock about once every 2 weeks. And the way I was working before I got the machine was I would basically spend a week pouring epoxy, and then I would spend the next week sanding and finishing and like basically shaping the box and doing all that. And so that would be so that would be my 2 week schedule, and I would get anywhere from 12 to 20 boxes that I would be able to do, depending on, if kids are sick or, whatever. When I got the new machine, part of it is it does go much faster, the making the bases. Whereas before the choke point, like everything kind of happened around the same time. Like it took a long time to make boxes, but it also took and pour the epoxy, but then it also took about the same amount of time to like shape and sand and do all that kind of stuff. Now, pouring the epoxy takes a long time, but the finishing process to get the epoxy looking good again, because it looks nice when you pour it, but then I have to sand it and shape it, and that at that point it looks terrible and like a gray mess. And so, like with most wood projects, like when I was making furniture, you would sand to 80 grit, then 120 grit, and then 220 grit, and then you'd be done. With the epoxy boxes, I sand 80, 120, 220, 400, 800, 1200, 2000, and then I hit it with 4 different polishing compounds. So it's just a huge, like that is a huge amount of labor. Then that's which is why I have to charge a lot, because epoxy, there are ways to do it where you don't have to, like, once you pour it, you keep it in a dust-free room and it is what it is. But the way I make them, they have like a concave top to them, and to get that you have to sand it. And also I find that I like the way it looks after it's been sanded away a little bit. You get underneath the surface and it's just more interesting. So the process is what it is. It takes a long time. But going forward, I would like to be able to do, I guess, maybe sticking with the same 2-week schedule, but sticking closer to 20 to 30 boxes maybe. We'll see what happens, how it changes, and see if that's something I can keep up with. If I can, that would be amazing, but we'll see. So much of what I've been doing the last couple of weeks has been figuring out how to like use the software and how the machine works, that I haven't been able to like fine tune my making process so that I am being efficient with my time, or at least as efficient. So yeah, I'm definitely in a moment, in a bit of flux right now, in a way I wasn't, say, 2 months ago, where I kind of knew what I was doing and knew what I was capable of.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that is a wild amount of labor that goes into the.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, you look at people who are making dice boxes, who are doing it in a production, like a large scale production process. Most of them they're shaped like hexagons, because if you shape them like hexagons, you can sand them all together. You can just kind of stack them up and sand aside, and like just kind of go across and then flip them and sand it, and save time that way. With mine, they're circles, so I have to sand each one individually. And again, I made I made these initially for friends, so I didn't put any consideration into like, oh, okay, how can I do this more efficiently? It was more just like, oh, I like this design, and if I ever wanted to try and go bigger than one person, and whatever I personally can make, I would need to look at changing the design up a little bit, or just making the process a little bit easier. But I don't want to make a business. I want to make things. I like I like woodworking. And so like, if that means I never am a huge player on the big company national stage, that's fine. I'm like so happy. I like this last year and a half, I've been just so happy to be able to do this, and to find people who appreciate what I'm doing. And my goal has always been to make enough to justify doing it. And right now I am, and it's it's never going to make me rich, but I am I'm very happy. So I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're doing what you love, and I feel like that's basically the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's definitely it's definitely always been my goal. And it's one that both my wife and I kind of support each other in that way. Like, the decisions we make are generally based on that metric, of what is going to make us happy, and balancing that with what are we going to eat. But it just, this past year and a half, or 2 years almost, that I've been doing this has been really great, and I wouldn't change it. And yeah, it's been just like I said earlier, I feel so fortunate. I can't even believe it.
Yes. I do want to make sure that I give time to ask this question that I like to ask in every interview,
Hmm.
which is when you look back over the last 2 years of, starting the Etsy shop and just the explosion of interest that you've gotten over that time, what would you say has been the most challenging part?
Um, for me, it's always doing new things. And so every time I've needed to, um, like even starting the Etsy shop was a mental challenge. And the first time I had to order wood to my home was always like nerve wracking beyond reason. Like it just it didn't make sense to me why I was as nervous as I was. But so I do always have a hard time. I am a creature of habit, I suppose, and so when things change up on me, I have a hard time adjusting or at least making that first move. But that's why I've had or been lucky to have the support that I do. And then on top of it, I think the biggest fear was just like the unknown of starting this up and like just kind of betting on myself enough, like all the way. That was really hard to do. But I think what being unemployed for a few months showed me is that even things that you think are stable can go away at any time. So there are no guarantees. There's no such thing as a safe job. It is a job, and that's what ultimately led me to kind of try this out. Is that I realized that if I wasn't going to do it, someone else was going to do it. So it might as well be me, and it might as well, yeah, I might as well, just kind of take the plunge.
Okay, I love that. That is really insightful, I think. And I know that like fear holds a lot of people back, but
Yeah,
I think that that's a really good mantra to try and counteract it is that, yeah, like someone's going to do it. It might as well be me.
it's not always easy to do, but that was definitely that was the thought that I had when I finally was like, okay, let's do this. Is that I am not an artist who doesn't like what they make. I know there are a lot of them out there, and God bless them for continuing to make things anyway. But if I didn't like what I made, I just wouldn't make it. That it doesn't make that's not how I'm wired. So I I was like, I like what I'm making. I think it's cool. I think it has value, and so why not? Let's give it a try and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, to circle around, again, looking over the last 2 years, what would you say has been the most rewarding part of this journey?
I think it's been a couple things. One, sharing it with my family and also my D&D group. They are so supportive of what I'm doing and like are cheering me on. And we play twice a week. Yeah, they're just 100% in my corner as well. So like being able to share it with them, share it with my wife, my kids has been great. And then also kind of discovering this community of the tabletop community, mostly on Twitter, and like being able to make functional art is really great. But I like the game has given me so many great moments with my friends that like I really love being able to be in a small way a part of someone else's table. If they look at their dice box and think that's really pretty, that's wonderful. But ideally for me, they also then remember some kind of moment in the game in their tabletop game where they're laughing with friends or they're shedding tears because a beloved NPC died, whatever. It is a small emotional connection, but it's one that I didn't understand how much I would really love being a part of, and I find really special.
That is really special. And yeah, just having that connection of any time that they look at one of your boxes, there's some memory associated with that. Like that's
I hope,
amazing.
yeah, like I realize that's not always the case, but maybe someone every once in a while thinks about it, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that I don't know. I am very much a role playing game convert, and I will proselytize about it to any who bother to listen, because it really has done a lot in terms of my mental health, my enjoyment of life, and my connection with people who I love dearly. So to be able to be a part of that experience for someone is really, I can't ask for more.
Absolutely. So I do very quick want to switch gears a little bit and just ask another thing that I find really interesting is about Etsy. So,
yeah.
So you've been using Etsy for almost 2 years now, and I am just curious about how you're feeling about it these days. Kind of what was the decision process in using it in the first place, how you felt about it, what you've learned, and if you're still good with it, if you want to move away. Just tell me about Etsy.
Etsy is a poster child for the power of forward momentum. And in that, I don't like Etsy at all. I, in fact, actively kind of dislike them. But leaving there right now is too much on my plate. When I started because I wasn't making any sales, and so it didn't matter, and it was free, except for they only took money once you made the sale. I eventually will move on, because the other thing, with that, so with the way my business has gone, I drive all my own traffic. I'm not getting anybody from, it's not like Etsy's bringing people to my site. They're not, because I don't have anything in my shop most of the time. And so with Etsy, they started doing shady stuff. They've probably always been doing shady stuff, but the way they deal with their advertising budget now, in terms of charging you if anyone has clicked on one of, like they promote you whether you want them to or not, and then if anyone clicks on that at any point within the next 30 days, if they buy something, Etsy's going to take 15%, which is wild and awful. Then they recently started doing, most recently, this is the thing that I'm like, I gotta leave. They did, they call it their star seller. And so you need to have 95% 5-star reviews. You need to have 95% tracking, or not tracking, shipments by X amount of time. And then also 95% in terms of your customer communication. But the thing is, with the 95, like if you get a 4-star review, that might as well be a 1-star review, right? Because that's not a 5-star review. So that counts against your 95% 5-star review. Then with communication and with shipping, like I occasionally, I say I don't do special orders because I don't, but if a friend or someone I know in the industry wants to do something, I'll do a custom order for them. So I will talk to them, I'll email them, we'll have a conversation. I'll create a special order, and in that I'll say to them, I'm going to ship this out on Monday, because that's when all the rest of my other boxes are going out, and I'm only going to go to the post office once. So, but Etsy doesn't have the opportunity or the option of pushing it back that far. So now I'm late because I've made a sale and I have not shipped it out on time. But I've talked to the person, and I'm very good at communicating, because, as I say, I do it right away. If you contact me, I will be very much responding very quickly. Because if I don't, I know it's a recipe for disaster. So it leaves no room for any kind of nuance or just kind of personal relationship. It's all just numbers that you plug into a machine, and I don't like them. I don't. They take more money per sale than something like Shopify does, for instance. They take more of a percentage, and yeah, I did, after my taxes this year, I did the numbers, and with what Etsy took compared to what Shopify took, would have taken, it was basically even. I think I paid $200 more for Etsy last year than I would have for Shopify, but I've since raised my prices and I sell more things now, and financially, as well as just like, Etsy kind of sucks. It doesn't make sense for me to be there anymore, but I just haven't. I don't want to make a website that isn't good, and I don't I haven't had the time to make a good website that sells things. So that it's in the works. It is definitely something that I want to do and hope to do soon. But yeah, I would like to get away from Etsy.
Fair enough. I've definitely heard some grumblings about the Star Seller program. But some of what you're saying, I did not realize it was that bad, especially with 15% of ad revenue. Mm.
Yeah. The ad thing was like, basically, if you ever see an Etsy ad, don't click on it. Just go to the store directly, and you will be doing that seller a much bigger favor. Because and like I think you can opt out of it if you make under $10,000 a year, but you can't opt out of it if you make more than that.
Wow.
So yeah, if your business is in Etsy and you need their kind of marketplace to keep going, it is they kind of put the screws to you.
Okay. Well, I hope that you are able to get away soon. I know that starting a new website and setting up a storefront is definitely a lot of work. But I can also, on the flip side, say it's not as scary as you think it is once you get started.
Well, here's the good news is so my wife has actually made my website. She's a web developer.
Well, all right then.
However, there's no back end.
Mhm.
It basically just links to my Etsy stuff. And if I want to do Shopify, I just need to migrate all that kind of stuff over. And yeah, I guess technically I do have a website. I haven't updated it since it was made, but it is at staffandbranch.com. But it's really out of date. And I do almost all things, like I send everything to Etsy for my shop and or Twitter, and to a lesser extent Instagram for kind of promotion and advertising, stuff like that. So
Okay.
yeah. So anyway, that's
cool.
me.
Well, thank you for giving me your honest feedback and opinion on Etsy.
Yeah, I realize it wasn't maybe the most political answer, but honestly, I feel I don't owe them anything, and if they kick me off their site, great, awesome, perfect. So motivation, but yeah, I'm glad you asked. They have been kind of circling my vision in terms of, God, I don't like that I'm associated with them. So maybe this will be good motivation.
Cool. Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming on to the show and chatting with me today. Where can people find you?
Mostly, you can find me at Staff and Branch at Twitter. I also do Instagram, where it is at Staff and Branch at Instagram. Yeah, and then my Etsy shop is Staff and Branch. So that's where all my stuff is. With Twitter and Instagram, when I have shop updates, a day or two beforehand, I will start posting the pictures of what's going to be in the update, as well as what day and time that update is, because as we discussed it, I started having to do that when things were selling out in minutes. So I try and give people as much of a heads up as possible. Those are good places to find information about when my next update is going to be. So
when you do have your restock go live, are we talking like 2 minutes, 5 minutes? How fast?
Yeah, it depends. Usually what happens is there are say I put up like 15 boxes. Usually like 10 of them are gone within like 2 to 5 minutes. Then 3 more might go within the first 20 minutes, and then there might be 2 that hang around for an hour or so. So if you have one you like, you gotta move quick. And like to the point where like people are like, it was gone before it even refreshed on my screen. Like I don't know how to make it better, and it feels weird when that happens. But I don't know how to I'm not. I hit the update button, and then Etsy decides when to show those people that information. So yeah, it can be really. I know people have been frustrated in the past, but I this is the fairest way that I know how to do it.
Yeah, totally. And hey, it is really exciting that you are so successful and that people love your boxes so much.
I mean, I would be lying if I didn't find it gratifying. If I said I didn't find it gratifying, but it also is very humbling and very just wild. I don't always get it, but I appreciate it always. So
Definitely. Well, again, thank you so much, Tim. This has been really fun.
Thank you, Courtney. I really appreciate you reaching out and having this work out. This has been great.
You just finished another episode of Roll, Play, Grow. To check out the show notes from today's episode, you can go to lightheartadventures.com/RPG. To keep up with every episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice. And if you're enjoying the show, I would absolutely love if you would leave me a review and share this episode with your friends. Your review might even get featured on an upcoming episode. To follow me on Twitter, you can either find me at lightheartadv for our business account, or at KetraWCR for tweets on gaming, my dog Bowser, and other random shenanigans. You can also find us as Lightheart Adventures on both Instagram and Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Roll, Play, Grow.